Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Mallory Joest. Looking forward to our conversation today, Mallory. Good
Yeah,
to
me
have you.
too.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
you're welcome. Very welcome. So, this word then, healing, to what extent does that resonate with you, Mallory?
Definitely. I think it resonates with me deeply just because as adoptees, we all carry trauma. Adoption, it's rooted in separation, loss, grief, and it can lead to feelings of abandonment, as well as identity issues. So I think it's important to acknowledge these experiences as real and significant parts of our journey.
Yeah. So, what does healing mean to you then? Obviously, the acknowledgement, as you said.
Yeah,
What else does it mean to you, healing?
I think it involves definitely confronting difficult truths about our past and our identities. I think it means sitting in all the ways adoptions impacted us, including and maybe and especially the painful parts, um, because only then can we begin to process everything and kind of move forward. I think there's a lot of growth in healing. For me, it's about transformation, turning pain into purpose, and making the things that maybe I once thought were weaknesses about myself, turning those into strengths, and asking myself what my experiences have taught me.
Yeah.
Um, I think it also offers a lot of opportunities for connectedness. I found that the more empathetic I am with myself, the more empathetic I am with others. And by better understanding my own pain, I become more compassionate towards others, especially those that carry similar trauma or have similar backgrounds. So it's in that space that I found a, a deep sense of community. And it's also given me the ability to better parent my daughter who's also adopted. I don't think healing has a beginning or an end. I think it operates on a continuum. And it's about continually seeking to understand, find acceptance and growth in your situation. And I also think that sometimes that might look like taking one step forward and three steps back. And by that, I just mean um, you might feel like you've reached the end of your healing journey, only to discover that there's more stuff that you've got to work through. And sometimes that even means revisiting things you thought you'd already processed. So I don't think healing's linear. It's complex and it's an ongoing process.
Yeah. I was did had a conversation this morning with a fellow adoptee, and uh, it we were talking about healing, and I was thinking about my own stuff and stuff that I've been working with her, and so I've been did a grief course with this adoptee Pamela Karanova, and it struck me that it, if I boil it down for myself, it's about um, how I see myself,
Mm-hmm.
or how I see myself, my self-esteem, my self-worth, those sorts of those that thing, seeing that one thing at infinite depth. So
Yeah.
it's not about digging 20 holes,
Yeah.
healing 20 things. It's about one healing, that transition to self-worth for so many of us that have felt that we weren't loved and we were abandoned. Um, but looking at that, the same thing, it's the same learning again and again and again and again. And so it's about depth rather than breadth.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So, do any particular healing moments come to mind, Mal?
Um, There are a lot actually. I think therapy has been a huge part of my journey. It's given me previously I'd never gone to therapy, but I feel like it's really given me a safe space to explore and understand my feelings when complex emotions arise. And I actually started this during my time as a foster mom. And so, which kind of leads to becoming a foster and adoptive mom. It's been, it's also been a huge part of my healing journey because so my adoption story was positive, and so I feel like I entered all of that with my rose-colored glasses on, just completely unaware of the nuances and complexities involved. Um, but I found empathy and forgiveness, I think, in this space, just watching my daughter's birth mother kind of go through her own struggles. I think it made me more empathetic towards birth mothers. It challenged my worldview really of it all and
Yeah.
helped me find forgiveness for my own birth mother. Understanding, helped me understand that maybe her decision wasn't as straightforward as what I'd once thought it was, and that it could have been filled with just as much chaos and pain as my own experience. Um, I also think the adoptee community has also been a huge part of that, both locally here in Indianapolis and online, which is how I met
Yeah.
you uh, through LinkedIn, because I think a support network is just everything. Um, yeah, and all of this has actually led me to start a nonprofit business. We offer trauma informed education to foster and adoptive families. And so it's kind of given me a purpose in helping to advocate for others with similar backgrounds. Um, because all the workshops we offer, they're based off feedback from the adoptee, foster alum
Yeah.
community. And then we partner with a therapist who specializes with working with the adoption constellation. And she's the one that leads these workshops.
Yeah. You've used the word empathy a couple of times, and I love the way that you first used it. You talked about self-empathy, and I thought that that was I've never heard that phrase used before, those two words put together. But it struck me as, oh, I'm getting a bit tingly in a good way. What does self-empathy mean for you, Mal?
So, I mean, I guess an example would be, I think especially like being an adoptee, you'd understand where I'm coming from. It's just, we tend to judge ourselves a lot. We struggle with things like self-worth. And I think self-empathy means, looking at these things and treating yourself the same way you would if it were your daughter or something or a friend going through that situation.
Yeah, interesting, because we often hear that idea, don't we? Treat others how you
Yeah,
in the general community, right? In the I can't want to say general public, people say, well, treat other people like you would be want to be treated
yeah,
yourself. But in this, you're reversing that. So treat yourself like you would treat other people, which is a
yeah,
nice kind of 180 degrees on the norm, right? That sounds good.
yeah. And I think, when you can do that for yourself, just in general, even, yeah, that transfers over, especially in this polarized world that we're living in right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Is it similar then to grace? Then, do you say self-empathy is similar to grace or different? How would you see that?
Mm, yeah, I guess that, I don't know. I could see where they're like interchangeable. I guess just like, again, thinking through some examples, I don't know, I have people, especially here in the US right now. I feel like a lot of people, it's just polarized. You're either over here on the left or you're over here on the right. There's not much leeway there, like in the middle. And while I have, my beliefs about certain things, like I can still hold space for the perspectives of others because I think even when we profoundly disagree with someone, If we can look at them on a human level and recognize, especially when we get to know them, that, these beliefs or the way that you feel about things, it comes from our own unique experiences. Um, yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
to learn there.
Yeah. I guess self-empathy, grace, lack of self-judgment, giving ourselves a break, these all seem to be fitting in together. And self, yeah, it's like it's ignoring the self-critic. And I find myself mentioning this book a lot at the moment. You heard of this book called No Bad Parts?
I haven't.
No Bad Parts. So No Bad Parts is looking at ourselves as a set of parts. So maybe a 2-year-old self, a 6-year-old self, what like particular landmark moments maybe that where where some big emotions were running for us. So looking at ourselves as a sum of different parts and not judging those parts, right? So no bad parts, which means so for me, it means grace and not judging myself for anger.
Hmm.
So something came up last night about some fights I had at school, right? And and the anger that had driven them, and self empathy or grace means not giving myself a hard time about silly stuff that I did when I was a kid. Um,
Yeah.
I want to talk about empathy and birth mothers because
Uh-huh.
you mentioned that as a big driver of healing for you. What what do you think? As you were describing it, I was thinking like empathy was almost like an antidote. Do you know what I mean? It was like it was something that took away a poison. It was like a painkiller.
Yeah.
Empathy, and I'm just wondering what it took away. What did empathy for birth mothers, having empathy for birth mothers or a particular birth mother, what did that add to your life, or what did that take away from your life? What impact has empathy, or does empathy continue to have on you?
Yeah, I think in general, it just makes me realize, you know, adoption, foster care, whatever it might be, it touches, all different parts of the constellation. Of course, like the adoptee, the child's at the center of it all. Um, but yeah, I'm a human being. And so I was, up until that point, I was kind of looking at things more from just my own perspective. Um, but yeah, I think that was probably one of the most difficult parts of my life, just going through that process, just because again, like I said, it's just that, you're challenging your worldview, and what you thought your entire life about your background is being challenged. And so I don't know, in a way, I still wrestle with it, but it also gives me peace. Because when I was younger, I feel like, you always have, especially being a transracial adoptee, you constantly have people asking about your background, or, do you eventually want to meet one of your birth parents? I feel like I just kind of came up with a generic answer because I didn't really want to think about it, which was just like, yeah, she gave me up for adoption. This is my life for a reason. So here I am, no interest in like, yeah, looking into my background or potentially meeting her or anything. but yeah, I feel like it was kind of a coping mechanism. Like, when someone asks you a question like that, it's just, yeah, it's so personal and like hard to think about. I just wasn't even like processing it, if that makes sense. So I feel like the whole foster care journey, for the first time, I think I actually like acknowledged. That was the first time I really truly acknowledged that I even had a birth family. Um, and then you go through all these, like, it was like going through all these different stages of grief as an adult. So yeah, for the first, I mean, initially I was super angry. Um, I was angry at her for the first time. I was angry at my daughter's birth mother. And yeah, this is kind of adding in like an extra layer or something. But I'd also during that time, probably a month after we had been our current foster daughter, our current adopted daughter had been placed with us. Um, I found out about a month in that I was pregnant. And so I ended up miscarrying, which is a whole other thing as an adoptee. Um, but yeah, that just added to my anger about the entire situation. And looking back, I don't know, that's kind of one of those things too with the self empathy that I've had to like um, another way that like self empathy has come into the picture, just because it's like you're going through all these things, you're processing all these things for the first time, you're angry, and at the same time, there's all this self loathing going on because you're judging yourself because, of the way that you're healing. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things where I kind of had to go through it. But in the end, like I found peace, and that maybe, the story that I told myself that um, my birth mother threw me away like I was some piece of trash. I just, yeah, I think it, especially like watching all this unfold as an adult with my daughter. Yeah, it was just really powerful to be
Yeah.
able to see that and realize that maybe her decision, like I said, wasn't as straightforward as what I thought, which changes the way, yeah, that I
Yeah.
think about myself.
How does it change the way that you think about yourself?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you understand as an adoptee, it's just, if the story is your mom didn't want you, you're this piece of garbage, she just threw you away like you're nothing. Um, how that makes you feel as a person, just like you're worthless, like the person who created me didn't even want me. And so just carrying that around. And I think regardless, like with adoption, as adoptees, we're always gonna carry a little bit of that with us. But um yeah, I think it would have changed, especially like growing up. I think it would have changed the way that I looked at myself, probably the way that I moved through my relationships, um, just everything.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? So to kind of sum up what you said in the last couple of minutes, is it that the empathy was uh, almost like an antidote to the anger, right? So empathy was like having the fire hose with water, and it put out the fire of anger
Yeah,
within you. Is that sound about right?
yeah, I think so. And it's just like I said, it's one of those things too. I feel like throughout this entire journey, there's all kinds of examples I could go through like that. And it's just one of those things where you have to go through it, all these like stages of grief all over again. To kind of get to that place of processing and healing.
So kind of with the anger gone, you used the word peace. So the empathy kind of has helped you to more place of more peace, and in that peace, from that place of peace, it's been easier for you to see your own self-worth.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to think about that for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that would mirror my journey. We get angry about being called angry, don't we?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely a common thing
we
within
get
our
angry
community.
about being called angry. And I've actually seen I see this a lot with non-adoptees as well, actually. Um, I can think of a few friends, you know, who something's happened and there's been some anger. And obviously I can relate to that because I've I go there too, right? Hopefully less often than I used to do. Um, hopefully I overact a little less frequently than I used to do. But if we kind of like, so I'm thinking of some particular friends, but if anybody um, uh, suggests that they're angry, they get angry about it. And now I can remember me doing this actually. We we went into a restaurant, um, and we were meeting some friends, and we were first there. Our friends weren't there yet. So I said, the greeter said, "I'll show you to a table." Um, and I wanted to have a drink at the bar, right? And I said, "Well, we'll just have a drink at the bar." And she wouldn't she wouldn't let us. She wouldn't let me. And I'm like, I had a little bit of a tantrum about it, right? It's about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Um, and and then my wife picked up on the fact that I was having a tantrum, and I was being angry. She called me out for being angry. And then I'm not angry, like
Yeah.
I was doing it. I was angry about being called angry. I was in denial about my anger. Somehow this is easier with trivial stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
um, we uh, we see we see ourselves perhaps easier with the trickier stuff, but and we move to awareness about it, right? As you said, you were
Yeah.
aware we're going through life. Our paradigm is our paradigm, and what makes us angry
Yeah.
until there's a disconnect, till something seems out of kilter, out of
Yeah. I don't know if you'd agree with this statement. I just feel like, um, yeah, on this healing journey, just as I kind of look back and go through all the things, do you ever feel like you, as an adoptee, that you carry this underlying anger with you just because of where we came from, our situations?
um, yes. Hopefully, hopefully it doesn't weigh quite as much as it used to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Hopefully, I don't overact as much as I used to do. Um,
yeah.
I
Like
don't
on
know.
anger too, I used to so I've also kind of like figured this out, just being more self-aware and intentional about healing on this journey. Um, just kind of examining how I've responded to loss and relationships in the past. And if I'm being honest, like I've only started to kind of like correct these things over the past like couple few years, but just recognizing patterns like abruptly ending relationships. And I think that stems a lot from my experience as an adoptee. But understanding these patterns has allowed me to kind of like break them, I guess, and repair and even like build better relationships. Just because, when you come from a background, especially like mine, where I don't know zip about my history, and the things that I do know, who knows if they're true or not. Um, but yeah, when one of the most significant relationships in your life um, starts with just cutting ties,
Mm.
or being severed, it makes a lot of sense to me. And again, not justifying like my behavior or the way that I've handled like prior relationships. It's just, again, like I said, it's something that I've come to appreciate as far
Yeah.
as becoming more aware of it. And yeah, there's all kinds of room too for not just building the stronger relationships, but like I said, repairing ones.
Yeah, I think I've sometimes uh, seen frustration. What I define as frustration is somebody else's anger, right? So as my volume button has gone down, as my anger has hopefully been turned down a little bit, my anger knob has been turned down a little bit, and maybe so I've been triggered less violently. My explosions have become quieter and become
Mhm.
less frequent, right? I've I every now and again something pops up where when what I think is frustration, somebody else would see that as anger. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, well, you should have you should have known me before.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I feel that.
making some progress. Healing. I'm talking about healing with fellow adoptees. I've spoken to 400 people for the podcast. I know what I'm doing on healing.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah.
And isn't it great when we can bring a bit of laughter to trauma because it's such a dark
Yeah.
subject, isn't
I
it?
know.
It's such a dark subject. Can we just turn on the light?
Yeah, I think
You
that's
know,
the beauty of being on this type of journey. It's just, especially initially, it's hard. We already have like our own super harsh self-critic. So when someone comes in, and says like, "Oh, you're angry, like you're over the top right now," or just anything that kind of goes, that makes us feel a certain way. It's just a huge opportunity to kind of listen to ourselves, and it's an opportunity for.
so we've been running okay all so far, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe Mallory will come back. I'll switch off my video, see if
Can
that
you hear
helps.
me now?
I can hear now. She's
Okay,
back.
I turned off mine too. I don't know what was
Yeah,
going on there.
cool. Yeah, just a little bit of a glitch. Might be my end, as I said before. I've had a couple of glitches this morning, but nothing for a week. I thought the problem had solved itself, but
No,
clearly
it's
not.
okay.
Um, can I go back to you said something about therapy in a safe space, right?
Hmm.
Therapy being a safe space. I'm wondering how do you see uh, how do you see safety and what's that? What does that what does that mean to you? What impact has that had on your healing?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes there are certain conversations that maybe you need to have, or maybe that you're willing to share with friends or family. And not that you want to filter that, but it's just kind of like managing, you know, first of all, processing whatever the experience might be, and then you have to attempt to understand it yourself before you can really relay that. I think that's a lot of what therapy's done for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about what we talked about being criticized before, as getting angry about being called angry.
Hmm.
Uh, so, in a therapist space, that's a safe space, isn't it? We're not going to
Yeah,
get criticized. We're not going to get criticized for our own emotions.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's why it feels safe, right? And maybe whilst we're listening to what the therapist has to say, maybe we're not listening to our own inner critic,
Yeah,
because we can only listen to one person at a time, really.
exactly. And I think it's been helpful too, just because once your therapist, I mean, you can share things with your therapist that you're aware of about yourself, but they're also going to pick up. things about you with their training over time. And I mean, there have been exercises that I've that I've had to go through to try to.
Yeah. She's gone again. It's faded again, ladies and gentlemen. Um, so yeah, I'm just thinking of anger and safety. And I'm thinking about um, trauma reactions, the fight, flight,
Yeah,
freeze. And I'm thinking about safety, like this in a safe environment with a therapist, with a friend that's non-judgmental, with a fellow adoptee that knows what it feels like. Um, and just think how less likely anger is to raise its head there.
yeah. Can you hear
Uh,
me now, Simon?
I can hear you now. Yeah,
Okay.
I've just been chuntering on, filling in
No, you're
the dead
fine.
space, and but I'm just thinking about anger and peace. Thinking about anger and peace. I like a juxtaposition. You used the word continuum earlier on. I'm thinking of a continuum between anger and peace, and uh, and instead of being angry about our anger, being at peace with our anger, not resisting it, not judging ourselves. What do you think?
Yeah,
That that grace and lack of judgment, self-empathy, like
yeah,
self-empathy for our own emotions
yeah.
and our own
I
actions.
think, yeah, it kind of makes me just think back to several examples actually. But I think, um, yeah, when you're in a place where you're trying to heal and find self acceptance, it also, I feel like a lot of times, like I've almost hit rewind back to certain scenarios or moments in my life that I didn't even fully understand at the time. Or maybe I was ashamed of my behavior, or I thought it was weird or something. And now I can look at myself with more compassion because I understand where it came from. One of the examples I'm thinking of is my wedding day. I've actually written about this before, but so um, it's supposed to be this really just exciting, like happy day. And not that it wasn't, it was just something hit me unexpectedly. So, my dad's walking me down the aisle, as dads do, and once we reach the altar, and he's giving me away, relinquishing his rights, kind of, it's like this whole symbolic act. Um, yeah, I just started crying. And luckily my back was to the crowd, but here I am supposed to be like, this should be a really happy time for me. And yeah, I was just so filled with grief and loss in that moment. And it just took everything that I had not to just kind of like fall apart. Like the tears were streaming and stuff. My body was convulsing because I'm trying to keep myself from crying. And yeah, I never understood. It's just like that's so weird, like that you did that. And in that moment, I kind of judged myself for it. But then also in our reception, when everyone's giving their speeches, I actually gave one about family and how while I was so excited to become a Joest officially, how sad I was that my name was no longer going to be Chafin, just because it's something that had been given to me with, everything that had been taken from me, basically. So that was, I just feel like the grief and loss they come out at really unexpected times in a big way, and especially during big like transitional moments.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this yesterday, actually. Like, when we think of a memory, we'll picture a scene, won't we? We'll like
Hmm.
you pictured yourself at the in the church. I presume was it a church or register office or
Yes,
yeah.
yes, it was.
So you pictured yourself there, right? And you've got all your you can remember you can remember it all, and you can remember your dress, and you can remember what was going on, your dad next to you, and you've got words to explain it all. Uh, and then it and then another sort of memory hits you, but this is a memory that you haven't got words for. You don't have
Hmm.
any pictures for. All you've got is this, all you've got is these intense emotions.
Yeah,
So it's like a memory made of feelings rather than
yeah,
a memory made of a memory made of pictures and thoughts. And
definitely.
that we can't we've got no thoughts to wrap around it, have we? We've got no picture. We've got we don't know what went on, and our minds can go into and bodies can go into overdrive on this stuff. As
Yeah.
I was watching a cop show last night about a guy with PTSD, and his description. So he had PTSD from his a cop who saw his partner die. You know, a
Hmm.
cop partner die when they were out at a whatever it was on a call in a house. They answered a call, and the the PTSD was rattling through the guy's body,
Yeah,
um, and it reminds me of what you just said.
yeah. It's like it. Yeah, I like how you put that. It's just, especially as infants, we don't have any conscious memories of the things that have occurred, especially pre-adoption. But yeah, our brains and our bodies definitely do.
Yeah, and I think I think in that absence, right, in that vacuum, uh, something we can, if we're creative, we can create a really dark picture of that.
Hmm.
I've never heard anybody create a light picture. I've never heard anybody paint a bright picture of that. I've never heard anybody, any adoptee. Um, I think we've got some kind of, as humans, we have don't we have this kind of built-in threat detection radar system kind of stuff? Like we've got
Yeah.
yeah. And so it's a natural bias towards the negative.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like I know that my brain can go into real hyperdrive,
Hmm.
painting that picture as really, really dark. So let me give you an example, right? So we have me and my wife have had dogs for a long time now, and we are now on our third and fourth dog, right? Our first two dogs unfortunately died. But remembering, I've heard our dogs, some probably two or three of them, cry at night. When we bring them home from their mums and they're like 8 weeks old. And I thought, I wonder if I was like that.
Hmm.
And my imagination can go into a real hyper negative hyperdrive on that to paint a very, very dark picture.
Yeah.
And I'm basically I'm being swallowed, pulled down a vortex. And that's what the mind can, that's what I think my mind can do
Yeah.
within with with the lack of the lack of the pictures and the lack of the language is what's happened.
Hmm.
So that's quite a heady thing, right? What I'm describing
Yeah.
there is quite a heady thing. It's quite a and the emotions are coming kind of on the back of that. But what you described at the church was far more visceral than that, right?
Yeah. I think it's interesting too. You talk about your dogs, and like I said, I was in the thick of this during foster care days. And even, seeing what my little one had to go through as an infant, and hearing her cry, it kind of did the same thing to me. It's just, it sends your body and your mind into overdrive, and you can't even explain why. And then it made me think back to, um, my own story from my adoption file. And yeah, it was just a dark place to be, to actually um, be in a similar situation as an adult, and think that, oh, like I was in a similar position to that when I came into the world too, especially when you never really, I never really thought that deeply into it, or even attempted to process all of that prior
Yeah.
to.
I think on the back of that realization and this conversation now, then I might be a little bit more uh, curious about my projection, about my memory. I might
Hmm.
take I might take the triggers. I might investigate the triggers. There might be that split. There might be a little split second of grace, So people talk about this, the difference between responding and reacting. Yeah.
Yeah.
The gap between the that it's a, it's a tiny window, isn't it? The gap between reacting and responding.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think I might see a little bit more of a gap there. But that doesn't that doesn't sound as great as the self-empathy thing that you talked about. Like this, it feels like if it feels like fighting these emotions or trying to respond rather than to react. That feels really hard work compared to just letting them in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much I've heard about this subject, about, we talk about the numbers of adoptees in addiction and
Hmm.
how, we're looking to numb, we're looking
Yeah.
to numb, and we're so scared of so scared of our emotions. We're scared of our trauma.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you see your It's a strange question, but I'll give it. I'll go with it anyway. How do you see your relationship with trauma?
I'm still here. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, you're just thinking.
I don't know if it's going to make sense. I just, I look at it as um, something that's part of me.
Yeah,
My experience and my experiences. I mean, we all have some form of trauma, I think, anyway.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, just, the things that have unfolded, and just the
Are
way
you
that they make you see the world.
are you more at peace with your trauma than you used to be?
Oh, for sure. I think before I didn't even want to admit it was there, or maybe I didn't even know it was there. A little bit of both, maybe.
Well, I think it's a fascinating conundrum that whether we don't know it's there or we were trying to block it out,
Hmm.
like how on earth are we going to know? It's a really tricky one. Um, and I think so much of it is down to that, the lack of words for it, the lack of pictures of it. I've been using this. I picked up this word. We talked about it today. I mentioned it. You mentioned this kind of like this pre-verbal trauma, um, and that's helped me see some stuff. That's why I'm doing some of the somatic experiencing that I'm doing to get to the pre-verbal to explore the pre-verbal stuff.
Yeah,
Um, I just I think it's more significant than I've felt than I've thought before. I've looked at pre-verbal and I've kind of dismissed it as quite rationally. All right, well, it's just something I haven't got words for. But
yeah,
as you were telling me the experience um, on your wedding day, um, it kind of brought this whole thing to life, that it's not just about no words for it. It's no words for it. It's no um, picture of it. It's um, just a scary blank.
yeah,
It's 100% feeling, isn't it? There's
yeah.
no words. There's no words. There's no picture.
And I don't know if you'd agree with this. I just feel like a lot of that too impacts the way we, especially as adoptees, handle loss. Like when I think about especially significant loss, but any type of loss, in the past I've kind of judged myself for, being a drama queen or whatever. But yeah, I think it hits us a lot harder than it does maybe the average person.
Yeah, because it's that. Um, it's touching the grief. What do people call it? Is it what do they call it? It's not absent grief. It's vague grief. There's a word for it. Sorry.
No,
Not
you're fine.
yeah, yeah. There's a word for it, and I think it's to do with like unrecognized grief or
Yeah,
well, I guess we could call it pre-verbal grief. Non, it's pre-verbal grief. It's non-verbal grief. It's grief. It's raw grief. It's raw kiddie emotion with
yeah,
no holding back, with no holding back. So here's the thing, right? This is another one that this is another thing that I learned that's helped me scare myself, Mal. So but like I heard this talk about uh, somebody saying, well, the babies are crying in an orphanage or in like a neonatal unit or like a
yeah,
row of kids in bassinets or whatever you call them. And the the nurses, one of the nurses saying, well, this is heartbreaking for me. Um,
yeah,
when they stop crying, we know that they're ready to be adopted.
yeah, yeah.
And that
Are they
just
saying because
sets
you, are they
that
saying it because the baby learned that their
to
crying
stop
doesn't do
crying.
anything?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Well, because will they, are they saying because the adopted parents aren't gonna um aren't gonna want the baby that's still crying?
yeah,
Are they saying, well, now they have numbed themselves,
yeah,
they're sufficiently numb? I was talking to a mum, and this was nothing to do with adoption at all, but she was talking to me about the fact that she had been told to feed the baby uh, every 4 hours and ignore the baby's crying in between times. And
Mhm.
this was seen as a good thing, get them into a routine.
Yeah.
It just seems totally and utterly inhumane, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's a polite word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm conscious
Yeah,
of
I've heard
time.
similar.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say I've heard of similar stories of especially, babies in more of like an orphanage situation, which is actually supposedly where I came from. But yeah, that it's quiet when you go in a lot of times. And that's because the baby learned that they're crying, isn't doing anything for
Mm.
them. And so,
Yeah.
like you said, they just kind of shut down, which is really sad, especially as an infant.
Yeah. But can't my mind and your mind and your heart? I'm sure we can wrap around uh, these spine chilling messengers and ideas and really go to town with them, right?
Yeah.
I could really, I could write a poem about that. I could write a blog. I could just get pulled down and down further into that darkness.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
so we've been on for a while and we could chat forever. Is this anything? Do you want to tell anybody more about the non-profit, Mal, or is there anything else you'd like to share?
So
Going to put a link
yeah,
to
like I
We've got a link to the website, obviously, in the show notes, as we always do, listeners, so you can check out what Mal's about.
Yeah, and we have Facebook and Instagram too if you're on social media.
Yeah.
We have our next trauma informed workshop with our workshop partner tomorrow. Registration's free if you're an Indiana foster parent. You get a training hour for attending. It's from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern time, and you can register on the
Yeah.
website. And actually, Simon will be
I'm
doing
doing one
one,
next month. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
under
so
our
yeah,
adoptees.
we're recording this podcast on the 25th of July. So go and have a look at the events on Mallory's website because we might miss the boat for that next one tomorrow. And I'm sure you'd be happy to hear from anybody on their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, listeners. We're going to turn our video. We have to turn our video off. We're going to turn our video back on again. Just say goodbye. That was hopefully try and get a bit more bandwidth. Um, uh, thank you, listeners, and thank you, Mallory. That's really some big topics there. Thank you for sharing. We'll speak to you soon, very soon, listeners. Cheerio. Goodbye.